Before every powerful version of yourself is born, there is a stage where your old life collapses. Your mind turns against you, people stop understanding you, and everything inside you wants to quit. But if you survive that stage, you will never be the same person again. Before you become powerful, something unexpected almost always happens first. Your old life begins to fall apart. And if you don't understand this stage, you will think you are failing when in reality you are transforming. Because power does not enter a life that is built on old patterns, weak habits, and limited thinking. Something inside your reality has to break first. Something has to collapse. Something has to stop working the way it used to. And that process feels painful because the mind interprets change as loss before it recognizes it as growth. At first, you don't understand what is happening. Things that once felt stable begin to feel uncertain. The routines you relied on stop giving you peace. The mindset that once guided you no longer feels strong enough. Even the way you see yourself starts changing, and suddenly life feels unstable. But what most people call chaos is often reconstruction, in disguise. Because before you can step into a stronger version of yourself, the weaker version must begin to dissolve. The habits that kept you average can no longer survive. The thinking that kept you limited can no longer control you. The emotional patterns that once defined you start becoming uncomfortable, and that discomfort creates internal pressure. You feel disconnected from your old self, but not fully connected to your future self yet. You are in between identities. And in that space, life feels confusing. It feels like things are breaking apart without explanation. But there is a reason for it. Your future requires a different mindset than your past. And if your mind stays attached to the old structure, you can never fully grow into the next version of your life. So life begins removing what no longer aligns with your growth. Sometimes it removes comfort. Sometimes it removes certainty. Sometimes it removes relationships, habits, distractions, or false beliefs. Not to destroy you, but to prepare you. Because power is not built on comfort. It is built on awareness, discipline, resilience, and clarity. And those things are rarely developed when life feels easy. That is why this stage feels so intense. You may start questioning yourself more than ever before. You may feel emotionally unstable. You may feel like you are losing direction. But what is actually happening is deeper than emotion. Your identity is restructuring itself. The old version of you is no longer strong enough to carry your future. And that realization changes everything. Because now, instead of seeing the collapse as punishment, you start seeing it as preparation. You begin understanding that life is not falling apart randomly. It is making space for something stronger. Think about it. If your old habits stayed comfortable, why would you change? If your old thinking continued working, why would you grow? If your old identity still satisfied you, why would you become more? Something had to stop working, and the moment it stops working, transformation begins. But this is also the stage where many people turn back. They try to rebuild the old version of their life because it feels familiar. They try to recover old comfort instead of stepping into new growth. Because the unknown feels frightening, and that is the test. Will you cling to the old version of yourself because it feels safe? Or will you allow the discomfort to shape you into someone stronger? Because real power is not just confidence or success. Real power is the ability to continue transforming even when your old life is collapsing around you. It is the ability to remain focused when things feel uncertain. It is the ability to keep moving when clarity has not fully arrived yet. It is the ability to trust the process before results become visible, and slowly, through this pressure, something begins to change inside you. Your mindset becomes sharper, your awareness becomes deeper, your emotional dependence on old comfort becomes weaker, and what once felt like destruction begins to reveal itself as rebirth. Because the truth is, powerful people are not created when life feels stable. They are created in the stage where everything old begins to break and they choose growth instead of retreat. And the moment you stop trying to save your old life and start allowing yourself to evolve beyond it, is the moment real power quietly begins to form inside you. Before you become powerful, there's almost always a stage where you feel completely lost. And this part confuses people because they expected growth to feel inspiring, clear, and exciting. But real transformation often begins with uncertainty. You stop feeling connected to your old life, but you are not fully connected to your future yet. Your mind stands between two identities, the person you used to be and the person you are becoming. And in between those two versions, there is confusion. You start questioning things that once felt certain. You start doubting paths that once felt obvious. You start feeling mentally overwhelmed for reasons you cannot fully explain. And because you do not understand the process, you think something is wrong with you, but nothing is wrong with you. Your mind is transitioning because power requires a completely different way of thinking, responding, and seeing life. And before your mind can fully operate at that level, it must first disconnect from old patterns. That disconnection creates instability. Think about it like this. If your entire identity has been built around certain habits, beliefs, and emotional patterns, what happens when those things stop feeling aligned? Your mind no longer has a stable foundation to stand on. The old structure weakens before the new structure forms, and that gap between the old and the new feels like confusion. This is why overthinking increases during transformation. Your mind tries to regain control. It tries to find certainty again. It keeps analyzing everything because it wants stability. But the more it searches for immediate clarity, the more restless it becomes. And suddenly your thoughts become louder than ever before. You question your purpose. You question your direction. You question yourself. But these questions are not signs that you are failing. They are signs that your old thinking is no longer enough for where you are going. Because before powerful people gain clarity, they often go through a stage where everything internally feels uncertain. Not because they are weak, but because their mind is reorganizing itself, and reorganization always feels messy before it feels clear. The mistake most people make is trying to escape this stage too quickly. They rush back toward comfort, they distract themselves, they force certainty where, before you become powerful, there is another stage almost nobody talks about. People slowly stop understanding you. And this part hurts more than most people expect, because human beings naturally want connection, validation, and support. But growth changes your mindset in ways that others cannot always relate to. At first, the shift is small. You begin thinking differently. You start valuing different things. Your priorities begin changing. The conversations that once entertained you no longer feel meaningful. The habits that once felt normal begin to feel like distractions. The mindset of the people around you starts feeling limited, even if you still care about them. And slowly, without trying to force it, you begin separating mentally from your old environment. This is where the distance begins. Not because you think you are better than others, but because your direction is changing. Your energy is no longer fully connected to the same routines, same thinking, and same emotional patterns. And the difficult part is this. Most people around you will not immediately understand your transformation, because people understand you based on the version of you they are familiar with. They expect you to stay predictable. They expect you to continue acting the same way you always have. And when you begin changing, it disrupts their image of you. Some people become confused by your discipline. Some people become uncomfortable with your focus. Some people even become resistant to your growth. Not always because they dislike you, but because your transformation reminds them of their own comfort zone. And this creates emotional tension. You may feel unsupported. You may feel misunderstood. You may even feel alone while surrounded by people. Because internally, you are moving towards something bigger, while externally, others still relate to your older identity. And this is one of the hardest parts of becoming powerful. You start realizing that not everyone can come with you mentally into the next stage of your life. Some people only understand the version of you that stays small. Some people only feel comfortable when you remain familiar. Some people support your dreams only until your actions actually begin changing. And when your growth becomes real, the distance becomes visible. This is where many people shrink themselves again. They stop growing to feel accepted. They hide their ambition to avoid judgment. They return to old patterns just to feel connected again, because rejection feels painful. But real transformation requires the courage to continue evolving even when others no longer fully understand your direction. Because power changes your standards. You stop tolerating constant distraction. You stop wasting energy on meaningless habits. You stop seeking approval for every decision, and those changes naturally create separation from environments that no longer align with your future. But here is what you must understand: this separation is not punishment, it is alignment. Life begins filtering your environment based on the person you are becoming. Some relationships grow stronger, others fade naturally. Some people evolve with you, others remain attached to the old version of you. And neither side is necessarily wrong. Growth simply changes compatibility. The problem begins when you resist this process because you fear being misunderstood. Because the truth is, powerful people are often misunderstood during the stage where they are transforming. Not because they are pretending to be different, but because their internal world is changing faster than others can recognize. And during this stage, you must learn something very important. Not everyone needs to understand your journey for your growth to be real. You do not need universal approval to evolve. You do not need constant validation to stay disciplined. You do not need everyone around you to believe in your vision before you act on it. Because the strongest transformations often happen quietly, before the world fully sees the results. And if you stay committed long enough, something eventually changes. The same people who once questioned your direction begin noticing your growth. The same discipline they misunderstood begins creating visible results. The same mindset they doubted begins producing a stronger version of you. But before that happens, there is usually a stage where your path feels lonely, and that loneliness is not a sign that you are failing. It is often a sign that you are separating from the life that no longer matches your future. Because before you become powerful, your mindset changes so deeply that not everyone can recognize who you are becoming while the transformation is still happening. And the moment you stop needing everyone to understand your growth is the moment your focus becomes stronger than their opinions. Before you become powerful, something unexpected begins happening inside you. Your comfort zone starts fighting back. And this is one of the most dangerous stages of transformation because the resistance does not always look obvious. Sometimes it appears as fear, sometimes as laziness, sometimes as doubt, distraction, procrastination, or emotional exhaustion. But underneath all of it, the same thing is happening. Your old mind is trying to protect the life it is familiar with, because growth threatens the identity you have been living as for years. The moment you begin changing your habits, your focus, your standards, or your mindset, your brain senses uncertainty, and uncertainty feels uncomfortable. So instead of supporting your transformation immediately, the mind creates resistance. It whispers things like, maybe later. What if this doesn't work? You're not ready yet. This is too difficult. And because those thoughts feel real, most people stop moving forward before they ever discover what they were capable of. This is why becoming powerful is not only about external action. It is about learning how to move through internal resistance without obeying it. Because your comfort zone is not just a physical environment, it is a psychological system built from repetition. It is made from familiar emotions, familiar habits, familiar thinking patterns. Even if those patterns are limiting you, they still feel safe because they are known. And the moment you try stepping beyond them, the mind reacts. It creates excuses to return you back to comfort. It magnifies fear to make growth feel dangerous. It increases distraction to weaken your focus. Not because you are incapable, but because your brain is trying to avoid uncertainty. And this stage feels incredibly confusing because part of you genuinely wants to grow. You feel inspired. You see a bigger future for yourself. But another part of you feels heavy, resistant, and mentally exhausted. That internal battle is the comfort zone fighting for survival. Because every new level of your life requires the death of an old pattern. If you want stronger discipline, your old habits must weaken. If you want greater focus, your distractions must lose control. If you want real confidence, your dependence on comfort must break. And your mind resists this process because comfort feels emotionally easier than transformation. This is why people often self-sabotage right before growth. They delay opportunities. They return to distractions. They lose consistency the moment progress becomes uncomfortable. Not because they truly want failure, but because their nervous system is still attached to familiarity. And until you understand this, you will keep misinterpreting resistance as weakness. But resistance is not proof that you should stop. In many cases, resistance is proof that you are approaching a new level. Think about it. The closer you move toward real change, the stronger your internal excuses often become. Before you become powerful, there is a stage almost nobody sees. No applause, no recognition, no visible proof that anything is changing. Just silence. And inside that silence, your discipline is tested more deeply than ever before. Because real power is not built when everybody is watching you. It is built in private. It is built in the early mornings when nobody knows you are trying. It is built in the moments where you continue working without immediate rewards. It is built when motivation disappears and you still choose consistency. And this is the stage where most people give up. Not because they are incapable, but because silence makes them question themselves. Human beings naturally want feedback. They want visible progress. They want signs that their effort is working. But growth often stays invisible for a long time before it becomes visible. And during that invisible stage, discipline becomes your only foundation. Because motivation is temporary. Some days you feel inspired. Some days you feel mentally exhausted. Some days you feel unstoppable. Some days you question everything. But discipline continues moving even when emotions change. And that is why silence is such a powerful test. Because when there is no validation, no support, and no immediate success, you discover whether your commitment is real or emotional. You discover whether you truly want transformation or only the feeling of inspiration. And powerful people are built in this exact stage. Not through intensity, but through repetition. The quiet repetition of doing what needs to be done even when nobody notices. The repetition of staying focused when distractions feel easier. The repetition of showing up for your future self even while your present emotions try to pull you backward. This is where your identity begins changing deeply. Because every action repeated in silence is shaping who you are becoming. When you continue, despite discomfort, you train resilience. When you continue despite doubt, you train mental strength. When you continue despite invisibility, you train discipline. And slowly, you stop depending on emotional highs to stay consistent. That is when your growth becomes real. Because before this stage, many people rely on temporary motivation. They act strongly when they feel good and stop moving when life becomes emotionally difficult. But silence removes emotional excitement. It leaves you alone with your habits, and your habits reveal your true level. This is why silence feels uncomfortable. There are no distractions hiding your weaknesses anymore. No external noise masking your inconsistency. No constant praise giving you emotional energy. It is just you, your mind, and your decisions. And in that environment, excuses become very loud. Your mind starts saying, "Take a break. You've done enough. No one cares anyway. What's the point if nothing is changing yet?" And if you listen to those thoughts long enough, you slowly return to comfort. But powerful people learn something important during this stage. Results are delayed, not absent. Just because you cannot see transformation immediately does not mean it is not happening. Every disciplined action is building something internally before it becomes visible externally. Think about physical strength. The body changes gradually before others notice it. The same is true mentally. Discipline shapes your mind quietly before life reflects the results publicly. And this understanding changes your relationship with silence. You stop seeing silence as emptiness. You begin seeing it as preparation. Because silence removes distraction, so your focus can sharpen. Silence removes validation, so your discipline can strengthen. Silence removes noise, so your identity can stabilize without depending on external approval. And eventually, something incredible happens. The actions that once felt difficult become natural. The discipline that once required effort becomes part of your identity. The consistency that once felt forced becomes automatic, and suddenly you realize you are no longer the same person. Not because one dramatic event changed you, but because silent repetition reshaped you over time. That is how real power is built. Quietly, slowly, repeatedly. Long before the world notices it, and the moment you learn to stay disciplined in silence without needing immediate rewards is the moment you begin building a level of power that cannot be easily broken by emotions, opinions, or temporary setbacks. Before you become powerful, there comes one final shift that changes everything. You stop waiting for your life to change, and you begin becoming the change yourself. This is the moment where transformation becomes real. Because for a long time, most people live in a state of waiting. Waiting for motivation, waiting for confidence, waiting for the perfect opportunity, waiting for life to finally feel easier before they fully commit to growth. But powerful people eventually realize something that completely changes their mindset. Waiting does not create transformation. Action does. And this realization feels almost uncomfortable at first, because it removes excuses. Suddenly you understand that your future is not only connected to what you want, it is connected to who you repeatedly choose to be every single day. And that means your next level cannot arrive while your actions still belong to your old identity. This is where everything begins shifting internally. You stop asking, "When will my life change?" And you start asking, "What kind of person am I becoming through my actions?" Because deep down, you realize something important. Power is not a moment, it is a pattern. It is built through repeated behavior, the way you think repeatedly. The way you respond repeatedly, the way you act repeatedly. And when those patterns change, your identity changes with them. That is why this final stage is so powerful. You stop romanticizing transformation and start practicing it. You stop depending on emotional excitement to take action. You stop making promises to yourself without following through. You stop waiting for perfect conditions before moving forward. And instead you begin acting like the person you want to become before your external life fully reflects it. This is where true power begins. Because most people wait for results before they believe in themselves. Powerful people believe through action before the results appear. They build discipline before success arrives. They build focus before recognition arrives. They build consistency before confidence fully develops. And slowly, through those repeated actions, they become unrecognizable from their old selves. But this stage is difficult because your old identity still tries to pull you backward. It reminds you of comfort. It reminds you of your past failures. It tells you that change is too difficult to maintain. And this is where your decisions matter more than your emotions. Because every action is a vote for the person you are becoming. Every time you stay disciplined, you reinforce strength. Every time you take action despite fear, you reinforce courage. Every time you refuse distraction, you reinforce focus. And over time, those repeated decisions build a completely different identity, not overnight, but permanently. And one day, you suddenly realize something incredible. The habits that once felt difficult now feel natural. The mindset that once required effort now feels automatic. The discipline that once felt painful now feels normal, because you are no longer trying to become powerful. You have become someone who naturally lives differently, and that is the difference between wishing for change and embodying change. Because real power is not external first. It begins internally through identity. It begins when your actions stop matching your old self and start aligning with your future self consistently. And this changes how you experience life.